Hi, I am Becky Amble, and I wanted to share with you some information about the Panama Canal. As you know, I was recently through the Panama Canal, which is pretty remarkable, and I've got a whole series of videos for you, and I'm not sure if you're going to see this one first or last, so I'm going to uh, do a little presentation here that I put together that I thought you might find interesting. And I think we are about ready to go. Come on, there we go. And this is going to be my little presentation about the Panama Canal, which I thought was, in addition to a historic endeavor in itself, it was maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. What I wanted to show you here is this is the opening slide of this presentation, and you can see, you may or may not be aware of the canal structure. This is a picture of the old canal, and the reason you can tell, so that you can impress your friends, is that the locks are shaped like a V. Do you notice that? And the newer locks are shaped straight across. But I'll show you that in a little bit. Anyway, the early, yeah, there we go. The earlier passages, of course, were a lot longer. And they told us when I was on the cruise ship that it would take 21 days to go around South America. Now, I don't know exactly where that started from because it took us must have taken us 11 days or something to get down there from Vancouver. And I don't know if the 21 days would have been Vancouver and getting around the south of the South America continent and then up to Florida. I don't know exactly what that was. But anyway, we know it would take a lot longer. So this was a major obstacle for shipping and traveling, and the Panama Canal was going to save time and resources and boost global trade. Now, early on, there were some major issues. France was trying to get this together, and they just couldn't get it. And mostly, well, and probably it was technology and everything else, but they had a lot of disease problems and engineering challenges, and it just was not working. So they sold their interest to the United States. And of course, who was our champion on that? Good old Teddy Roosevelt. And he took that on and said, we're going to do this, and bought the canal. That happened in, I believe it's 1904. And one of the unsung heroes that I learned about that probably most people haven't heard about is a guy named William Gorgas. And he was in charge of making it habitable so that the canal could be built, because they kept having disease and people were dying and they couldn't survive because this was the tropics. And a lot of people, France and Americans, didn't know how to really function in the tropics. So he put together this plan to substantially mitigate the mortality of people. And he used what was called the mosquito vector theory. I'm not going to get into that theory, but in Cuba, he headed up this project and they eliminated yellow fever in 3 months. And so early in the spring of 1905, he would oversee the most expensive and expansive public health campaign to that point in American history. And that was when they were getting ready to really start going, but they had to come up with a way that they could have workers survive. Anyway, it was a remarkable engineering feat, excavation, tons and tons of earth had to be removed. The lock systems had to be put in place, and they had to engineer how that was all going to work. And they needed bridges and infrastructure. All kinds of things were really a challenge. And you can imagine what it must have been like for engineering back in 1904 and 1905. So some of the challenges and obstacles, like I mentioned, disease was a problem, landslides, because they had to dig down particularly far in some areas, and they had landslides. And then they came up with the terracing structure and putting plants on to try stabilize the ground. And just the engineering complexity. The one thing that was extremely difficult was how were they going to move water out of the locks, and where would they put the water? And if the water just was put on the land and it disappeared, how would they refill the locks when they needed to refill to raise the ships? It's quite a remarkable story. Anyway, I got this image to show you what the locks look like. I came in over here on the right on the Pacific, And the bottom locks, the Miraflores locks, are the original ones. And the new locks were put in, I believe, in 2016. And those are the Cocoli locks that you can see that are more in the upper portion of the lock images. So we came in from the Pacific. We had to have our ship raised up, go into the next lock, raised up again, go into the next lock, and then raised up once more, and then go through the channel to Gatun Lake, which is quite extensive, and then go into the first of the Aqua Clara locks, get the water raised or lowered, then get into the second locks and lowered, and then to the next channel, and finally out to the Caribbean Sea or the Atlantic Ocean, whichever name you're going to call it. And here's just a pretty simple map. Again, I started over here on the right side in the Pacific, and we went through. You can see how it goes, and you can see how massive Gatun Lake is here and the area that goes through. I believe they said it takes 8 to 10 hours to get through the canal, and that was a cruise ship that probably goes about the speed of a carrier, the shipping container ships, I would guess. I don't know if anything goes any faster. And then the last city on the Atlantic side is Colon. And of course, Panama City is quite extensive now, and that was where we started from. Then here is a little bit more detailed map, so you get a better feel for the geology and just that there's hills and mountains or valleys, all kinds of things, and the waterway. Again, kind of interesting to see what it looked like. And here we are wrapping up the canal with the new locks and expansion. The new locks are wider, they have increased capacity, and of course, it's made a huge economic impact. Now, this, as you can tell, because of the V shape, this is a picture of the older locks. Here's what the new locks look like. I think this is at Cocoli, which would be on the Pacific side. And you can see the locks here partially are open. They, I don't know if it would be sliding, but they move and they close over here. If you can see where I'm moving my mouse, that's when it's closed, and then they retract, they move back into this area. And there's 3 locks you go through, and some of the locks, when they're closed, there's basically, it makes a small bridge so you can drive across, and that is quite limited. There's not a lot of traffic that can go through that. And I believe here you can see some of the basins for holding the water. So this goes, opens, and then the ship goes forward to the next lock that closes behind them. Here's another picture that I wanted to show. You can see then that the locks go straight across, no angles, and they retract into whichever side it does the housing. And in this case, it would be they would move to the right and retract to the right. And you can see then there are the 3 locks. And I don't know, this I am kind of thinking might be on the Atlantic side. Anyway, there's the 3 basins of water for each lock, and that holds the water as it is drained out of the lock, and then it fills the lock as they're raising water up. That's what I got for you. And if you are interested, there is a lot of information that you can research on your own. I just thought it would be helpful to put together this little presentation. If in fact you've looked at my videos or are planning to look at the videos, this gives you an idea of a little more narrative, because some of my videos you can't hear the audio, some of them are sideways. That's just the way it worked out. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you found this interesting and maybe a little educational.